There's a lot about resilience that I think all of us can really learn and build resilience. Some people have asked me, well, I just don't feel like I'm resilient. I'm not that, and it's like, no, 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 you can. I mean, it's all based on how we deal with life changes. And
Welcome back to Defeating Weekly. I'm your host, Craig Olson. You guys, I am super excited today as we have a very awesome guest, Terry Healey, who is a phenomenal person. I've just started getting to know him a little bit more and very excited for what he's going to share with you guys today. So, a little background: Terry is a survivor of a life threatening cancer that left him with a permanent facial difference. Terry's an author, keynote speaker, and a business strategist. He's a graduate of UC Berkeley with a 35-year career as a marketing executive. He's a jack of all trades. Healy challenges audiences to face adversity and change and to apply his framework and principles to gain confidence and find joy in their personal and professional lives. He lives in Santa Cruz, California. You guys, I mean, just looking at this, Terry's got so many things that he does. So, Terry, welcome to the show. I'm super excited for today.
thanks, Craig. Glad to be here. Appreciate you having me on your show.
Awesome. So, kind of going through Terry's profiles and kind of his backstory, I felt like great topic for today is building resiliency through challenges. And Terry, you lived it. You had to go through your cancer diagnosis and challenges that came with it. And I saw on your website, resiliency just kept coming up. Seems to be a huge part of what your story and you feel your purpose is for others. So, kind of first question to jump in. So, being a cancer survivor and having been left with a facial difference, how did you build resiliency to be able to push through during treatment and then following as you've moved on with your life and what you've been doing now?
Yeah, Craig, I was really blessed. I think that I was surrounded by really positive people. Um, I had a crew of people around me that I trusted, and that included my medical team from the get-go, right? I trusted my medical team. There was a good connection that I made with them, and that enabled me to keep hope, right, throughout the process. I think faith was a big part of it as well. I've always been somebody that has really relied on faith to give me courage and strength. So, there's a lot about resilience that I think all of us can really learn and build resilience. Some people have asked me, well, I just don't feel like I'm resilient. I'm not that, and it's like, no, 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 you can. I mean, it's all based on how we deal with life changes, and so there's a lot that we can learn from others as well and apply in our own lives. And a lot of these things are natural things. We just have to let them build in our lives.
For sure. That's so cool. And it's so awesome to see the kind of correlations, tangents with your story and then Rachel, my first wife, and her battle, just how we'd walk in and the doctors there called her the poster child for brain cancer. And so that positivity that they were instilling, it just does so much for the patients, but also the caregivers, the whole group together. When they've got that positivity, it's just amazing what can become of it. So that's really cool
Yeah,
that you bring that up. And I mean, faith, that's what we relied on to get through those times where it was like, that news is not what we wanted. It's not what we were expecting, but using the positivity and the faith was huge. So that's
yeah,
awesome. That's super
yeah.
exciting to hear. So you kind of went into this a little bit already with the idea, but so you kind of talked about your team. Was there anything else that kind of helped motivate you, kind of maybe to getting to where you are now? Did you kind of already see some plans early on in place of what you could use your
Yeah.
trials to do?
Yeah. So, I mean, my story about overcoming this disfiguring cancer was pretty significant because I was only 21 years old when it happened. And that's when appearances matter so much, right? And
Yep.
so I think my journey became almost less about the cancer as it was about the reconstruction and rebuilding myself over time. And so, it was a difficult process to go through, but I learned a lot about myself as we kind of touched on. One of the fortunate things that I was blessed with was that I was always somebody that was very focused and goal oriented, and I think that that came into play huge in my life because I realized if I could set goals, if I could face challenges one at a time. So I was very careful about, Craig, I hate these things in the workplace that I live my life dealing with, which is okay, what are your New Year's resolutions? What are your top 10? And it's like, no, 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 no.
Yes.
Focus on one thing and achieve it. But so for me, I was able to kind of focus. It was a great process for me to gain confidence. Every time I achieved a goal or overcame a challenge, it gave me more confidence to face the next one. And so that was really key for me. But I also learned through that process that that was a way to rebuild confidence, to regain self-esteem, right? As as I set goals and achieved them, I started to feel better and better about myself. Because let's be honest, after being 21 and becoming facially disfigured, my confidence level sunk to a new low. I became very insecure. But then I found things like group therapy, right? And I don't know if you ever experienced that, but for me, what was great about it was that it took some courage,
Mhm.
but I started to share my vulnerabilities and I started to really feel honest for the first time because around the people that I loved, I didn't really feel as comfortable being honest. So around another group of people like that, I could be honest and vulnerable, and that really helped me to begin to realize that I actually had an inspirational story to share that I didn't realize. I didn't feel I had anything inspirational. So that was another stepping stone to help me to start to rebuild and take two steps forward instead of and one step back instead of the way I had been living up until that point.
Man, that's so cool. Yeah, the idea of the one goal, kind of you got your focus in being able to celebrate those, I feel is so huge as well. I
Yeah,
mean, you start thinking if I've got this big goal, and actually I just did a podcast similar to this last couple weeks of that idea, if we are only focused on that big overarching goal, we're missing all these little things that we've made progress on that we should be celebrating,
yeah,
whether we're going through the trials of a cancer diagnosis or just living life. If
yeah,
we're always focused on those big goals, there's so many things along the way that we should be celebrating. Like I'm making progress or
yeah,
did this. And so often you see people getting disgruntled. I mean, being a middle school math teacher, I just had conferences and we were talking about how, these kids see one big score and they're like, well, I didn't do good. However, you break it down, it's like from beginning to now, you've grown in so many different areas. Let's look at these specific things. There's a lot to
yeah,
celebrate. So
absolutely.
that's so cool.
100%.
So cool. All right, so we're gonna go back a little bit in your story. So, 1984, diagnosed at 21. Uh, Kind of another correlation. That's when Rachel was diagnosed with hers as well. So, very interesting. What was your diagnosis, and how was your initial response to finding out that you had cancer? And then, how did you eventually move into kind of that new purpose that you had for your life?
Yeah, great question. So I was 21 years old, as you said. I was a senior at UC Berkeley. I was really living life on easy street, right? Things were pretty easy. And
Yes.
all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I get this bump behind my right nostril, prompted me to go to a doctor eventually. And I was diagnosed with this rare form of cancer called a fibrosarcoma. Very, very rare. I was very blessed that I got the right diagnosis, especially at that stage, because it's so rare they often misdiagnosed it.
Oh, okay.
So therefore, it would get treated differently, right? But in my case, they looked at it, they said, hey, we've caught this early. They treated it with surgery and surgery only. They got clear margins, sent me on my way. Went back to Cal, started living the same old life. 6 months later is when I had this recurrence where I ended up having this 11-hour procedure that resulted in the removal of half of my nose, the
Okay.
shelf of my right eye, the muscle and the bone from my right cheek, part of my upper lip, part of my hard palate, and 6 of my teeth. And I woke up, Craig, attached to my chest like this because they transplanted a full thickness skin graft from my chest to fill in this cavity that had been created on my face. And so that was really the point at which it hit me super hard, right? Like, oh my God, I look like the Elephant Man. And that's really where my journey, I think, began. And it became less about the cancer and more about the reconstruction.
Okay.
And so, though as I mentioned earlier, I had hope and my doctors told me they were going to get me reconstructed back to that old Terry, the reality was over time, that became less and less real. It became something that seemed far reaching. It just didn't seem like it was going to come together. Years were passing, right? And so I had to find other ways to rebuild who I was because as I saw the likelihood of getting reconstructed disappearing, my self-confidence was declining. And so what was I going to do?
That's interesting. So, kind of thinking about it, when you just mentioned your self-confidence is starting to decline, was there a specific moment or event that kind of took place where you're like, okay, I got to start moving in a different direction or refocus in a
Yeah.
different direction?
Yeah, so what happened was I completed a lot of the major surgery that I had to have. I completed the radiation that I had to have. And I began to realize, hey, just existing to get treated is not the life that I want to live, right? I don't want to think about my next procedure. I need another purpose in my life. And so I was fortunate to finally graduate after dealing with that. And I got my first job. And that was significant because suddenly I did feel like I had a new purpose. I had something else to put my head into, put everything into because it was a challenge. It was something that it was a startup. There was no process. And so that was the best thing in the world for me because it was like the world was my oyster. Go figure it out, Terry. And so what I realized, Craig, was that I actually did have value and I had the ability to find success. And so over time, I pretty quickly was getting promoted and finding that my value was something that helped me to begin to believe in myself again. And then, as I said before, tacking onto that, the group therapy, being able to talk to other people, I began to look forward to that time with other people and realize that my purpose, though work was a big purpose, right? The thing I got the most excited about was sitting down with other people and helping them deal with some of the things that seemed really simple to me, but were difficult for them. So one of the blessings, as you know, with adversity, I think, is that you gain empathy,
Yes.
you gain gratitude. And when you have empathy, you can really help other people in a way that's incredibly powerful. It's therapeutic in its own right, but that became a purpose that I realized I really want to do something with this. So that's where I eventually wrote my book and started speaking. But for the time being, the reality was I had a job, right? I had a day job. So.
Sure. That's so cool. And I love how you kind of explained that transition from just the treatment and going through that to bigger purpose. And that was kind of where I came up with my title for my book of Defeating the Unbeatable. I mean, in the
Yeah.
end, death, we can't beat death, but we can defeat what's going on in our life and have a bigger purpose and use it to do something. And so that's so cool that you share that. That's awesome. I very much appreciate that. So kind of leading in before we get to our action steps for today, I love
Yeah.
this question of when you look in the mirror right now, what do you see?
I see someone that has battle scars that I'm proud of, right? I look at myself every day and I'm reminded of the journey that I experienced, and I'm grateful that, hey, I transformed. This life experience gave me a new path that I never would have anticipated, that I would never wish on anybody either, but it gave me a new path that I feel blessed for. It's an experience that I never would have guessed, but it took me in a direction that I think is very positive. So when I look in the mirror, I'm reminded of it every day. I can't help it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's one of those things growing up, you see someone that maybe has a facial difference or, a limp or whatever it may be, or wearing like Rachel had a radiation type cap that she wore. You'd see them as a kid and you're like, that's kind of weird. What's going on there? But now it's as you go through them, it's like it's not a I'm not going to hide from it. This shows what I've went through, and I can now see what has become, what I have become, what I'm able to do for others. And it's such a remarkable thing that I am so blessed to be able to have this conversation with you and just be reminded that we all have these battle scars that maybe some of us they're visible, some of us they aren't visible, but they are who help kind of mold what we are and who we are. So that's awesome. I
And
appreciate it.
can I add one thing to that?
Yeah, of course.
I think what's interesting about me seeing myself in the mirror and being reminded is that over time, so as you gain confidence, what I began to realize was that other people notice me less, right? They notice that facial difference less. And so I think it has a lot to do, it's kind of a takeoff from where you were heading and what you were talking about is that we it's really how we carry ourselves, right? And when you carry yourself with confidence, people don't notice the things about you that you think might be what's driving your insecurity, or you might think that make you look different. It's like, it's funny, but I don't have these experiences anymore where I'm in the coffee shop or I'm in the Safeway and three little kids are in the line behind me. In the old days, it was like pointing, giggling, pointing to their mother and saying what happened to him. Now it never happened. So I look the same. So it's not like the world is transformed. I think it has a lot to do with just how we become comfortable with who we are.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. All right, so with defeating weekly, my goal is to always provide action steps that the listeners can take and apply to their life, whatever it may be. Do you have a couple action steps that kind of help drive you or that you think would be beneficial to people that are building this resiliency?
Yeah, I do. I developed, as you mentioned, I developed this adversity framework that I call REBAR. And it's composed of four phases or principles. And I'll talk about the first three today. This is all in my book that's coming out in September of 2025. But the first one is reflect, right? So I learned that reflection became incredibly powerful in my life. So if everybody can take even 5 minutes a day, whether it's on your walk, whether it's walking your dog, whether it's right before you go to bed, but reflect on your day and think about what happened. What am I grateful for? What what did I learn today? Was there anything I was inspired about today? Because I think when you start this practice, you begin to realize that there's a lot going on that we sometimes forget about and don't think about, and we just keep moving. But pause, reflect. The second one is build. The build phase is about building a positive mindset and a growth mindset, right? As you learn to adapt to change. And this is really about having a support system. It's about having that positive outlook. It's about maintaining life balance and setting goals so that you can focus your life on really positivity and optimism. And that's really how you can navigate life's challenges instead of with fear and uncertainty. And then the third one I would say is to act. And so you've reflected, you've started to build a positive mindset, and now you can act. And act is really where the rubber meets the road. And that's really where I think we begin to face challenges head on, we take control, and we start to find that ability to focus and persevere toward goals. So you start to set goals and you say, I'm going to achieve this, and here's how I'm going to do it. And those are some of the steps that I think all of us can take with any kind of adversity, right? It's not just about cancer, but any kind of a challenge. It's a great process to go through. So I would say reflect, build that positive mindset, and then begin to act on
That's so awesome. I mean, as you're talking, that reminds me every year I kind of have like a focus statement that I have for that entire year. And for 2024, my quote was tools and knowledge only work with action. And so it's just kind
it.
of going through, like you said, you got the you building phase of or reflecting into what have I done so far. Then we got the tools and the knowledge within your build, and now you got to act. We can have all the tools. There's resources everywhere that we have, but if we just have the resources, don't do anything with it. I mean, I can have a brand new set of golf clubs and never work on anything. It ain't going to change my golf game. I got to
It, uh,
put it into action. So that's super cool.
yeah.
Super cool. And then I always try to leave each episode with a quote. And so I asked you if you had one in mind or kind of have one in mind. So do you have kind of a favorite quote or kind of guidance that you use for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I talk a lot about is that I just ask, and it goes back to reflection a little bit, but it's really about asking people to try to be more aware, to be more alert and attentive to what's happening around you at all times, whether that's somebody that you're interacting with or an event that's transpired. Open yourself up because there's huge possibilities. And when you open yourself up, I think it increases your outlook. It makes you more hopeful. And so those are all things that lead toward, I think, a more positive mindset.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Terry, I want people to be able to find your work and maybe be able to connect. So, where is a good place people can buy your books, reach out to you, learn more about you?
Yeah, just go to my website, which is terryhealey.com, and that's TerryHealey.com, terryhealey.com, and you'll find all that stuff there and plenty of resources.
Awesome. And I'll put the link right in the notes for this so that people can easily click on that and go right to that as well. Awesome.
Awesome.
Well, Terry, I just want to thank you for your time. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed learning your story and just all that you have shared and your positivity. I feel like that is huge. And I mean, you've been on here smiling through the whole thing, super exciting. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time and good luck to you moving forward. And everyone, as always, please have a great day and defeat the weak.
Back at you, Craig. Thanks so much. Have a
Awesome.
great day.
You too.
Take care.